In the bustling city of Seoul, where the sound of cars and the hustle and bustle of narrow streets create the daily soundtrack, two lonely hearts follow their routines without imagining that they are about to cross paths. Park Ji-hoon, a 27-year-old fashion designer, is going through a difficult period in his career. His last collection, which was highly anticipated, was a failure. He lost important contracts and, along with them, his self-confidence. What was once a vibrant passion and a promising talent has now turned into a shadow of doubt and frustration. Ji-hoon is a reserved man, someone who, despite his early success, always preferred the silence of his studio to the chaos of big parties and social events. However, since the failure of his collection, he has been spending more and more time at the cozy cafe owned by his childhood friend, Kim Eun-ji. The cafe, a welcoming place with a calm atmosphere, is a refuge where Ji-hoon feels comfortable reflecting on his problems and seeking solace in his friend's words. On that day, a gray and rainy afternoon, Ji-hoon enters the cafe once again, carrying the weight of failure on his shoulders. The place is almost empty, except for one or two customers absorbed in their own worlds. He sits at his usual table by the window and orders his usual coffee. Kim Yoon-ji, a cheerful and optimistic woman, tries to cheer him up with some encouraging words, but Ji-hoon is so deep in thought that he barely listens. His eyes are fixed on the window, where the rain taps against the glass, reflecting the emotional turmoil inside him. Suddenly, something catches his attention. On his table, there is a notebook that he hadn't placed there. It's a simple notebook with some signs of wear, as if it had been handled many times. Curious, Ji-hoon opens it. What he finds inside is nothing short of impressive. Fashion sketches, detailed and full of life, each line perfectly drawn with a vibrant creativity he had long lost. He flips through the pages, feeling a mix of surprise and admiration. Who could have left this here? The drawings are so good that he feels a spark of inspiration, something he hasn't felt in months. For a few minutes, he forgets his own problems and gets lost in those creations. Not knowing who the notebook belongs to, Ji-hoon decides to leave a note inside it, expressing his admiration for the work and his desire to meet the artist behind the sketches. He writes something simple, but sincere. "Your drawings are incredible. Thank you for reminding me why I love fashion. Who are you?" As Ji-hoon writes the note, the rain continues to fall outside, creating an almost melancholic scene. But inside him, there is a small spark of hope reigniting. He doesn't know who the artist is, but he feels that this unexpected encounter might be a sign that things will get better. Meanwhile, across the city, Lee Soo-jin is dealing with a completely different reality. At 29, she is a resident doctor in one of Seoul's largest hospitals. Her life is fast-paced and full of responsibilities. Exhausting shifts and the constant stress of dealing with patients leave her emotionally drained. Even so, Soo-jin is dedicated to her profession. She believes that helping people is her purpose in life, but lately she has been feeling lonely. The pressure of work leaves no room for relationships or moments of rest, and she wonders if she will ever find someone who can understand her chaotic life. In a rare moment of downtime, Soo-jin decides to visit the bookstore she used to frequent during her college days. The bookstore is a quiet, cozy place, a refuge for her, much like the cafe is for Ji-hoon. She walks among the shelves, taking in the comforting smell of old books. Her eyes pass over various covers, but none of the titles attract her attention until she finds a book of poetry left on a table. The book is open to a page containing a poem about loneliness and the search for meaning in life, something that deeply resonates with what Soo-jin is feeling at that moment. Without thinking twice, she sits down and begins to read. The words of the poem touch a part of her soul that has long been dormant. The poetry speaks of the challenges of finding purpose amid life's chaos, and how sometimes the answers to the questions we ask are closer than we think. Feeling grateful for that moment of reflection, Soo-jin decides to leave a small note inside the book, something simple but full of emotion. "Thank you for leaving this book here. Your words touched me deeply. Whoever you are, know that you made a difference in my day." Just like Ji-hoon, Soo-jin has no idea who left the book there, but something inside her changes at that moment. For the first time in a long time, she feels that there is something beyond exhaustion and stress. There is a spark of hope, a small reminder that there is still beauty in the world, even on the hardest days. And so, without either of them knowing, the destinies of Ji-hoon and Soo-jin begin to intertwine. Both have left messages for someone they do not know. Both find solace in the small gestures of strangers. What they don't know is that these simple acts of kindness and anonymous connection are about to change their lives in ways they never imagined. The messages left in the notebook and the book are just the beginning of something much bigger. And so, under the rain falling on Seoul, two lonely hearts quietly begin to walk toward each other. In the days that followed, both Park Ji-hoon and Lee Soo-jin continued their routines, but now with an unexpected and exciting change in their lives. Both eagerly anticipated returning to the places where they had found a piece of inspiration and comfort. For Ji-hoon, the sketchbook had left a deep impression. He returned to Kim Yoon-ji's cafe with the hope that the owner of the drawings had read his note. For Soo-jin, the poetry book had stirred something inside her that she thought was lost. The ability to be moved by small, thoughtful gestures. Her hospital routine remained intense, but now she had a reason to visit the bookstore whenever she could find a moment of rest. Ji-hoon began making the cafe his second home. Each time he entered, his eyes immediately sought out the mysterious sketchbook. He sat at the same table, drinking his coffee slowly, waiting. With each passing day, his curiosity about the artist behind the drawings only grew. Who could this talented, creative person be? Someone capable of expressing such emotion in their sketches. He wondered if the note had been read, and more than that, if he would receive a response. To his surprise, on a quiet afternoon, the sketchbook reappeared on his table, placed exactly where he had found it the first time. Ji-hoon's heart raced as he carefully opened it. There, next to the beautiful sketches, was a new page with a handwritten message. "Thank you for your compliment. I'm glad my drawings touched you in some way. I'll keep drawing while searching for inspiration in the world around me. Who are you?" A smile spread across Ji-hoon's face. The anonymous exchange of messages had begun. He felt an unusual excitement, as if he were part of a mysterious game, and it made him feel alive again. He picked up his pencil and wrote a new response, sharing a bit of his own journey. "I'm a fashion designer who lost his way for a while, but your drawings reminded me of what I love to do. Maybe we can inspire each other." While Ji-hoon exchanged his messages at the cafe, Lee Soo-jin continued leaving her responses at the bookstore. Every time she visited, her heart pounded with anticipation. The poetry book stayed in the same spot, as if it were waiting for her. When she opened the book again, she found a new note attached to the poem's page. "I'm glad the words in the book touched you. Poetry also helps me get through tough times. Maybe our stories are more alike than we imagine." Soo-jin felt an immediate connection to that message. Although she didn't know the person who had written it, there was something comforting in the idea that, in a city as large as Seoul, she shared something deep with a stranger she had never met. As each new shift at the hospital passed, she thought about the next message she would write, eager for the moment when she would find a break in her schedule to return to the bookstore. At the end of a particularly exhausting week, she went back to the familiar spot, tea in hand, and wrote her reply. "You're right. Sometimes I wonder if there's anyone who understands the weight I carry. But your words brought me some peace. I hope we're helping each other." As the silent exchanges continued, both Ji-hoon and Soo-jin began to realize that these small, anonymous gestures were doing more for them than they had expected. For Ji-hoon, the drawings in the sketchbook reignited his creative spark. Inspired by the talent he found on the pages, he started drawing again, creating designs that felt more authentic and full of emotion. He shared this evolution in his messages, explaining how he was rediscovering his passion and how this exchange of ideas was transforming him. Soo-jin, on the other hand, found emotional refuge in the poems and messages. Working as a doctor was exhausting in many ways, but knowing that someone was out there, sharing thoughts and feelings so deep, helped ease the pressure. Even though the connection was anonymous, she felt less alone. The words from the unknown person calmed her, and the poetry she found in the book made her reflect on her own life and the paths she had chosen. Over time, the messages became more personal and intimate. Jihoon shared his frustrations over the failure of his last collection, talking about how he felt he had let down the people who believed in him. Sujin, in turn, revealed the loneliness she felt, not just because of work, but because she had never found someone who could truly understand the life she led. Each new note they exchanged deepened their connection, even though they still didn't know who the other person was. Jihoon began to feel that the messages were not just a way to express his thoughts, but a genuine exchange of mutual support. With each response he received in the sketchbook, he felt like he was getting closer to someone who understood his struggles in a way that few others could. He also felt that he was helping the other person, which gave him a renewed sense of purpose. For Sujin, the feeling was similar. Every time she read a new message, she felt as if the person behind the words was someone she could rely on, even without knowing them. The exchange of notes became a highlight in her routine, something she eagerly awaited in the rare moments of rest between shifts. She began to wonder who this person was, and what it would be like to meet them in real life. As the weeks passed, Jihoon and Sujin began to develop a unique connection. Although they had never met, they shared dreams, fears, and aspirations. Each written message was a piece of the puzzle of their lives, and both felt that, in some way, they were understanding themselves better through these exchanges. The anonymity made this relationship purer, free from external judgments or expectations, something that both deeply valued. However, as their connection grew, so did the desire to know who the other person was. Both Jihoon and Sujin began to wonder what it would be like to meet this person in real life, to put a face to the words that had become so important in their lives. Little did they know, they were closer to discovering that their paths had already crossed in ways they could never have imagined. As the weeks went by, the exchange of messages between Park Jihoon and Lee Sujin took on even greater significance. The notebook and the book had become their secret diaries, where they poured out their frustrations, hopes, and small triumphs. For Jihoon, each new sketch he found in the notebook represented a new spark of creativity. His own drawings were coming back to life, and as he flipped through his old and new creations, he realized he was evolving. Sujin, on the other hand, felt that the words she received in the poetry book were a silent support, helping her stay strong during long, emotionally exhausting days at the hospital. That afternoon, Jihoon felt particularly anxious. Sitting at his usual table in Kim Yoon-ji's cafe, he could hardly focus on the conversation his friend was trying to start. His mind was occupied with the words he had written the last time. "I feel that through your creations, I am finding my passion again. I wanted to thank you for that. Would you like to meet someday?" Jihoon knew he was taking a big step. The anonymous exchange had become a kind of safe routine, but he could no longer contain his curiosity. Who was this mysterious person who had unknowingly helped him break out of such a deep creative block? What motivated them? What did they look like? He had spent so much time trying to imagine the person behind the sketches that the idea of finally meeting them was both exciting and frightening. With his heart racing, Jihoon opened the notebook he found, as usual, on the table in the cafe. There, among the pages of new and impressive sketches, was a response. "I'm glad my creations inspired you. Maybe it's time to discover who we are. I'd love to meet you. Let's meet at Namsan Park at sunset next Saturday." Reading those words, a smile spread across Jihoon's face. It was as if the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. He wrote a brief confirmation in the notebook but couldn't hide his excitement. Saturday seemed so far away, and the wait would be endless. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sujin was just as nervous. She read the response she found in the poetry book. "I'm ready for us to meet. I think it's time to see who's behind the words that have given me so much strength. Let's meet at Namsan Park at sunset next Saturday. I'll be waiting for you." Sujin, who had always been more rational than impulsive, felt a whirlwind of emotions reading those words. The simple act of arranging a meeting seemed monumental. She had found comfort in the messages, but never imagined that this would lead to such a personal situation. Who was this person who had shared so many feelings similar to hers? She didn't know what to expect, but one thing was certain. She felt connected to this person in a way she had never felt before. On Friday night, the anxiety for both of them was at its peak. Ji-hoon couldn't sleep, replaying all the messages they had exchanged and trying to imagine who he would meet the next day. He spent the time revisiting his own sketches, mentally preparing himself for the encounter. Soo-jin, on the other hand, tried to keep her mind focused on work, but it was impossible. Between attending to patients, she thought about the person she would soon meet, wondering if it would be someone with whom she could finally share her life. On Saturday, the weather in Seoul was perfect. The sun began to set slowly on the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange. Namsan Park, one of the city's most beautiful and peaceful spots, was filled with people enjoying the late afternoon. But Ji-hoon and Soo-jin had only one person on their minds. Both arrived at the park a few minutes early, hearts racing and expectations high. Ji-hoon, dressed simply but with his usual stylish touch, walked through the park, observing everyone around him. He tried to imagine who the person he was about to meet might be. In his mind, he pictured someone who shared his passion for fashion, someone creative, sensitive, perhaps with the same dreamy look that he had when observing the world. He stopped near the meeting point, a small clearing near a tree, and looked around, trying to spot the person he was waiting for. Soo-jin, for her part, walked toward the park with quick, nervous steps. She wore something simple and comfortable, not putting too much effort into her appearance, as what mattered was the meeting, not how she looked. As she approached the designated spot, her heart beat faster and faster. The anxiety was almost unbearable, but at the same time, there was a latent excitement. What if this person was everything she had imagined? Someone with whom she could finally relax and be who she really was? Finally, their eyes met. Ji-hoon, turning to see someone approaching the park, froze for a moment. It was Lee Soo-jin. He recognized her immediately. She was the woman he had seen a few times in the bookstore he frequented. Soo-jin, in turn, also stopped abruptly when she recognized Ji-hoon. He was the regular customer at Kim Eun-ji's cafe, the one who was always lost in his own thoughts but whom she had never paid much attention to. Both stood paralyzed for a few seconds, unable to believe what was happening. The person they had been exchanging so many words with, revealing secrets and sharing dreams, was someone who had already, in subtle ways, been part of their daily routines. The shock of the discovery was immense. They knew each other, but at the same time they didn't. It was as if two pieces of the puzzle had finally come together. Soo-jin felt a mix of emotions. She knew she had seen Ji-hoon before, but she had never imagined that he was the person behind the words that had comforted her so much. Ji-hoon, for his part, was equally perplexed. He looked at Soo-jin, trying to absorb the situation. How had he never realized that the person he had been exchanging messages with was someone he had crossed paths with countless times? For a few seconds, neither of them knew what to say. Then, something magical happened. The looks of surprise and shock were replaced by smiles. Ji-hoon took a step forward, still trying to process the situation, but already feeling a sense of relief. Soo-jin did the same. Without saying a word, they approached each other, and the silence between them was comforting. What could have been an awkward moment became an exchange of knowing smiles. They met halfway, and Ji-hoon finally spoke, his voice a mixture of nervousness and joy. So, it seems like fate had its own plans. Soo-jin chuckled softly, feeling the same relief that Ji-hoon did. I guess so. And to think that we've crossed paths so many times. The initial nervousness began to fade, giving way to a feeling of comfort. The shock of recognizing each other was replaced by a calm acceptance. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin realized that, in some way, destiny had brought them together long before they could have imagined. They might not know everything about each other yet, but the most important thing was clear. They shared something deep, something worth exploring. The day of the much-anticipated meeting had finally arrived, and although Namsan Park was full of people enjoying the late afternoon, Park Ji-hoon and Lee Soo-jin's world seemed to slow down. Every second felt like an eternity as their eyes met. These were the same eyes they had crossed paths with so many times, without ever imagining they belonged to the person they had been exchanging such intimate words with. The shock of seeing each other, in a completely different context from what they were used to, brought a mix of emotions: surprise, joy, nervousness, and even a bit of disbelief. Ji-hoon was the first to break the silence, trying to hide his nerves with a smile, still wondering how he had never realized that the woman he occasionally saw in the bookstore was the same person who had helped him rediscover his passion. "So, we already knew each other this whole time," he said, trying to process everything. Soo-jin, still surprised, smiled shyly and nodded, laughing at the irony of the moment. "Yes, it seems our paths had already crossed. We just didn't know it until now." She looked at Ji-hoon more closely. The quiet, thoughtful man she saw in Kim Yoon-ji's cafe now seemed much more than just a familiar face. "I never would have guessed that you were the one," she added, a little awkwardly. "Neither did I," Ji-hoon admitted, laughing softly to ease the tension. "I was so focused on our messages and what the person behind them meant to me that I never thought about who it could be in real life." The two laughed together, their nervous laughter echoing through the park. That nervous yet comforting laughter began to break the ice between them. Little by little, the surprise gave way to a sense of familiarity. There was something special about that moment, as if they were destined to be there, side by side, even if destiny had played tricks on them for a while. "I always saw you in the bookstore," Ji-hoon continued, still smiling, "but I never imagined you were the one behind those poems and words that touched me so deeply." Soo-jin looked at him, surprised by the coincidence. "And I saw you in the cafe. Always so quiet, immersed in your thoughts. I never thought you were the one writing those notes that gave me so much support during these months." She sighed, as if processing everything all at once. "It's funny, isn't it? How we can be so close to someone and still not see who they really are." Ji-hoon nodded. "Yeah, I guess we were more connected than we thought." Slowly, the initial discomfort gave way to a more natural conversation. Walking side by side through the park, they began talking about the previous weeks, about how the messages and the drawings had helped them cope with their personal struggles. Ji-hoon told Soo-jin about his creative block, the pressure he felt to succeed in his career, and how the sketches she left in the notebook had reignited his passion for fashion. "I was at a point where I thought about giving it all up," Ji-hoon admitted, his eyes revealing the sincerity of his words. "I felt like I had failed and wouldn't be able to get back on my feet. But your drawings gave me a new perspective. It was like I was seeing fashion in a way I hadn't seen it in a long time." Soo-jin listened attentively, her eyes full of understanding. "I'm glad my drawings helped you," she said with a genuine smile. "But honestly, you helped me much more than you know. Being a doctor is everything I've always wanted, but it's also a lonely and sometimes emotionally exhausting job. Reading your words and knowing someone understood my feelings gave me the strength to keep going." Ji-hoon looked at her with admiration. "I didn't know you were under so much pressure at work. I've always admired doctors, but now, knowing what you go through every day, I admire you even more." Soo-jin smiled, slightly blushing. It was rare for her to receive this kind of recognition, especially from someone she now felt truly connected to. They walked in silence for a few minutes as the sun began to disappear on the horizon, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and pink. The moment seemed perfect, as if the scenery around them was conspiring to make the meeting even more special. When they reached a bench under a tree, they sat down, still reflecting on the conversation they had just had. There was so much more to say, but there was also a comfortable silence that surrounded them. Ji-hoon, quiet for a few moments, was deep in thought. He wanted to do something to mark this meeting, something that would show Soo-jin how much she had meant to him. Finally, he broke the silence. "You know, I brought something with me today," he said, pulling out a small sketchbook from his bag, different from the one in which they had been exchanging messages. "These are some of the new designs I've made since we started exchanging notes. You were the inspiration for many of them." Soo-jin looked at the sketchbook in his hands, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Can I see?" Ji-hoon nodded and handed her the sketchbook. Sujin began flipping through the pages, captivated by what she saw. Each sketch seemed to tell a story, an evolution in Ji-hoon's style, which now felt much more free and expressive. She saw strong but also delicate strokes, full of personality and emotion. One design in particular caught her attention. A simple yet elegant dress with details that reflected something ethereal, almost as if it captured the essence of a calm but strong soul. "This one is beautiful," Sujin said, pointing to the sketch. "You have an incredible talent, Ji-hoon. I really believe you're going to stand out even more with these new designs." Ji-hoon smiled, grateful for the compliment. "Thank you. That dress was inspired by a conversation we had in one of the messages about how simplicity can contain so much beauty and strength." Sujin's heart raced when she heard that. It was impressive how something she had said casually in the messages had transformed into a work of art in Ji-hoon's hands. "It's amazing to see how something I said could inspire you like this," she said softly. Ji-hoon looked at her, his eyes now serious. "You've inspired me in ways you can't even imagine, Sujin. You helped me find my way back to my art, and I'll be forever grateful for that." Sujin smiled, feeling a warm glow in her chest. Ji-hoon's words touched her deeply, and she realized that this meeting was more than just the revelation of who they were. It was the beginning of something new, something they both knew would need to be explored with care and patience. As night fell over Namsan Park, Ji-hoon and Sujin continued talking, laughing, and sharing stories. The connection between them, which had started anonymously, was now even stronger, more real. It was no longer just about drawings or poetry. It was about them, as individuals beginning to discover each other. As the city lights began to glow in the distance, they realized that something special had happened in that park. And although destiny had played a significant role in bringing their paths together, it was now up to them to decide how to move forward. After that unforgettable meeting at Namsan Park, something changed deeply between Park Ji-hoon and Lee Sujin. The connection they had established anonymously through the notebook and the poetry book now took on a new meaning. It was no longer just words and drawings exchanged from a distance. Now, there were faces, gestures, and a tangible reality behind everything they had shared. And with that, a new chapter in their lives began to unfold. The chapter where friendship turned into something deeper and more sincere. In the days following their meeting, Ji-hoon and Sujin started seeing each other regularly. At first, their outings were discreet, quiet walks in the park or casual meetups at Kim Yoon-ji's cafe. The conversations flowed naturally, as if they were continuing the exchanges from the notebooks, but now with each other's physical presence, which only made everything more intense and real. There was something special in seeing each other's reactions, in the shy smiles and the looks that said more than words. Ji-hoon, now full of inspiration, began dedicating himself more intensely to his work. His sketches were more creative than ever, and the idea of a new collection began to take shape in his mind. But this time, he wasn't drawing to impress critics or to win contracts. He was drawing, inspired by Sujin, by the moments they shared, by the conversations and the feelings that were growing between them. Sujin, on the other hand, found in Ji-hoon a safe harbor. Her work at the hospital remained exhausting, but she now had something to look forward to at the end of her long, difficult days. Ji-hoon's messages, a quick coffee between shifts, or even a simple smile he gave her when they met. Ji-hoon didn't demand that she be someone different from who she was, didn't expect her to change her routine or slow down. He was just there, offering support and understanding, something she had never experienced so deeply. One rainy night, a few weeks after their meeting in the park, Ji-hoon and Sujin decided to meet at their favorite cafe. The cozy atmosphere, with the soft sound of rain falling outside, created the perfect setting for a more intimate conversation. They sat at the same table as always, and between sips of coffee, they began to talk about the future. "Have you thought about what you're going to do with your new collection?" Sujin asked, curious about Ji-hoon's projects. She knew how excited he was about his new designs, but she could also see the shadow of insecurity that still hung over him. Ji-hoon sighed, looking out the window where raindrops ran down the glass. "I've been thinking about it all the time," he admitted. I feel like I'm finally creating something that's genuinely mine, without the pressure to please anyone. But at the same time, I'm scared of failing again. Sujin placed her hand gently on his, and he felt a comforting warmth. Jihoon, I believe in you. Believe in yourself too. What you're creating now comes from an honest place, and that's what matters. People will feel that. And even if things don't go as you expect, you can always try again. Sujin's words echoed in Jihoon's heart. There was a simple truth in what she said, something he knew but needed to hear from someone he trusted. He gently squeezed her hand and smiled. Thank you, Sujin. You've been such a big part of this journey. Without you, I wouldn't have found my way back. Sujin's eyes sparkled with emotion. She knew their feelings were growing, but that moment felt like a turning point. There was a closeness between them, something that went beyond friendship and mutual support. It was love, something that had started with their words in the notebook but was now blossoming in a palpable, real way. I've also found something in you, Jihoon, Sujin said softly. Even on the hardest days at the hospital, knowing that you were there, supporting me, gave me the strength to keep going. I never thought I'd find someone who could understand my life the way you do. They looked deeply into each other's eyes, and at that moment, the silence spoke louder than any words. It was clear to both of them that what they had was more than just a connection. It was something strong, something worth nurturing. After that night, things between them started to change quickly. Their relationship evolved naturally, and soon Jihoon and Sujin were together in a way they had never been with anyone else before. Jihoon, always gentle and thoughtful, found ways to support Sujin in her exhausting career, whether by preparing small surprises on her toughest days or simply listening to her talk about her patients and daily challenges. Sujin, in turn, did her best to be present at the most important moments of Jihoon's career, even though her schedule was complicated. Despite the depth of the feelings they shared, their relationship also began to face its first challenges. Sujin's routine at the hospital was intense, and as the months passed, she realized that balancing her professional life and her relationship with Jihoon was harder than she had imagined. There were days when she was so exhausted that all she could do was collapse into bed, leaving messages unread and postponing plans. Jihoon, for his part, tried to be understanding. He knew Sujin's life was complicated and demanding, but as his own projects progressed, he also began to feel the weight of professional responsibilities. His new collection was gaining recognition, and with that came new pressures. Dealing with interviews, events, and deadlines left him drained. He began to feel that the time he spent with Sujin was shrinking, and this left him restless. One particularly stressful night for both of them, they met at Jihoon's apartment for a dinner they had planned, but the meeting didn't go as expected. Sujin was exhausted from a 24-hour shift, and Jihoon was frustrated with a setback in his collection. The conversation, which started with good intentions, quickly turned into an outpouring of pent-up frustrations. I feel like we never have enough time for us, Jihoon said, his voice a mix of frustration and sadness. I know you're busy, but I am too, Sujin. And sometimes it feels like we're putting our relationship on the back burner. Sujin sighed, exhausted. I know, Jihoon, but I'm doing the best I can. My work is demanding, and it's not like I can just take time off whenever I want. I'm tired, too. Jihoon ran his hands through his hair, feeling torn between understanding Sujin's position and dealing with his own emotional needs. I know your work is important. I just don't want us to lose what we have because of it. Sujin looked at him, feeling a pang of guilt. She knew Jihoon was partly right, but she also felt she was giving everything she had to keep the relationship going, even if it was hard. I don't want to lose what we have either, she said softly, but we need to be realistic about what we can give each other right now. The conversation was difficult, but at the same time necessary. Both realized they would need to find a balance between their careers and their relationship, and that would require effort on both sides. Despite the difficulties, the love they had for each other was strong enough to make them willing to fight for it. That night of confrontation, marked by outbursts and tension, left a reflective silence between Park Ji-hoon and Lee Soo-jin. Both understood that for the relationship to thrive, it would take more than love. They would need patience, commitment, And above all, conscious choices. In the days that followed, the weight of the conversation still lingered over them. However, instead of growing apart, Ji-hoon and Soo-jin began to think about how they could better handle the situation. Ji-hoon, now with his new fashion collection nearly ready to launch, felt pressured by deadlines and expectations. But he didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. He didn't want his career to consume his life completely. And most importantly, he didn't want to lose Soo-jin. Since the first note they exchanged, she had become his source of inspiration, his emotional support. And he knew he couldn't let that slip away. Soo-jin, in turn, felt drained by the constant demands of the hospital. More responsibilities, endless shifts, and the emotional toll of dealing with difficult patients left her exhausted. Still, she loved what she did. Being a doctor was part of her identity. But at the same time, she was beginning to realize that she might be neglecting her own happiness. She knew she needed balance, and Ji-hoon was part of that balance. One sunny afternoon, a week after their difficult conversation, they decided to meet at the same park where everything had begun, Namsan Park. The place, which had witnessed the beginning of something special, seemed the right spot for a calmer conversation about the future. Ji-hoon arrived first, sitting on the bench under the tree where they had met for the first time, watching the children play in the distance and feeling the gentle afternoon breeze. Soo-jin soon appeared with a shy smile on her lips. Her face, though tired, seemed a little lighter than it had been the last time. As soon as she approached, Ji-hoon stood up to greet her, and they sat side by side, not in a hurry to start talking. There was something comforting in the silence between them, as if the park itself was giving them the time they needed to find the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," Ji-hoon said, finally breaking the silence in a calm, almost reflective tone. "About how things are getting hard, and how I don't want that to push us apart." Soo-jin looked at him, silently agreeing. She had also spent the past days reflecting on the relationship, thinking about what they could do to handle the inevitable challenges. "Me too," she responded softly. "The truth is, our work will continue to be demanding and we'll always face difficulties. But I think we need to find a way to balance everything, without losing sight of what matters." Ji-hoon smiled, feeling the relief of hearing that Soo-jin was on the same page. "I agree. I know life will never be perfect, and there will always be something going on. But I think we both need to learn to make choices. Choices that help us take care of each other, even when work feels overwhelming." Soo-jin nodded, her gaze fixed on their intertwined hands. "Maybe that means making small sacrifices. We may not be able to see each other every day, but when we do, we need to be present, really present for each other." "Exactly," Ji-hoon replied, turning to face her. "I've been so focused on trying to balance everything that I let the fear of losing you grow inside me. But I think I've realized that if we're both committed, we'll always find a way to make it work." Ji-hoon's words gave Soo-jin a warm sense of comfort. She had been so consumed by work that she had forgotten that love, like her career, also needed investment. "I think the same thing happened to me. My job makes me feel like I have to be available all the time, but that can't stop me from being with you." They looked at each other for a moment, sharing a silent understanding that, from now on, things could be different. Not perfect, but better, because now there was clarity about what they needed to do. Their love, which had started so delicately, anonymously, and mysteriously, was now something tangible, and like anything important, it needed care. Ji-hoon smiled, breaking the seriousness of the moment. "Who would have thought that a notebook left at a cafe and a poetry book at a bookstore would bring us here?" Soo-jin laughed, remembering how it all began. "Life is funny like that, isn't it? I never imagined that finding those messages would change my life so much." "And now here we are," Ji-hoon continued, holding her hand. "With choices to make, but knowing we don't have to make them alone." With this new perspective, the two decided that, despite the demands of their jobs, they would prioritize more time together. They promised themselves that instead of letting tension build up, they would talk openly whenever something was bothering them. Additionally, they vowed to support each other's dreams and goals, even if it meant making adjustments to their routines. In the days that followed, they began to put those ideas into practice. Ji-hoon, about to launch his new collection, now felt more confident, not only because he had rediscovered his style, but because he knew that no matter what happened, he had Soojin's support. She, in turn, became more clear about her own needs, both at the hospital and in her relationship. She started finding small moments of pause in her routine, whether it was for a quick coffee with Ji-hoon or to relax and recharge her energy. The big day of Ji-hoon's fashion show finally arrived. He was nervous, of course, but when he looked at the front row, there was Soojin, with an encouraging smile that immediately calmed him down. The event was a success. His new collection, inspired by simplicity and human emotions, was well received by the critics, and Ji-hoon felt more accomplished than ever. But the true triumph for him wasn't just the professional recognition. It was that, at the end of the show, Soojin was by his side, celebrating with him. A few days later, it was Soojin's turn to face a challenge at work, a complicated surgery that demanded all her skills and concentration. And as she prepared for the procedure, a simple message from Ji-hoon appeared on her phone. "You're amazing at what you do. I believe in you." That was enough to calm her down and give her the confidence she needed. Over time, they learned that even when life was chaotic, the love between them was a daily choice. It was about being present, even when time was short, and supporting each other every step of the way. No matter how many challenges arose, what mattered was their decision to face everything together. And so, with the passing months, Ji-hoon and Soojin solidified their relationship, proving that true love isn't just something that happens. It's something that's built with patience, dedication, and above all, choice. They learned that destiny can bring two people together in unexpected ways, but it's the choices they make every day that keep that love alive. Under the Seoul sky, illuminated by the lights of the city that never sleeps, Ji-hoon and Soojin continued to walk side by side, ready for whatever the future held. After all, their destinies had crossed, and now it was their responsibility to walk the path they had chosen together. What a moving story, isn't it? And now, we want to hear from you. What did you think of the ending of Destinos Cruzados? Will Ji-hoon and Soojin be able to maintain a balance between love and career? Leave in the comments what you liked most and how you think the story can continue. We'd love to hear your opinions and theories. Oh, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the story and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our next videos. We have many more incredible stories waiting for you. And since you're here, how about taking a look at the other videos on the channel? There are more exciting romances and dramas that you can't miss. Click here and watch right now.